My name is Dr. Nicole Truesdell. I'm an anthropologist by training and an abolitionist scholar, teacher in practice, and this is my YouTube channel, so welcome. So what this video is actually a compilation of a number of shorter videos I created on my TikTok explaining what I would call Abolition 101. So as an anthropologist but who's committed to abolitionist teachings in the public, it's really important for me that people kind of get a deeper understanding of what abolition truly is or really is by getting an understanding of what abolition is trying to abolish, which is essentially the hold of the colonial projects that have had on our systems and our imaginations and our understandings of what it means to be human. Abolition then becomes a process, becomes an act, becomes a praxis of having us see the way that these projects have created inequitable and unsustainable structures that are oppressive in nature. And because of that, how do we then pull that apart so that we can remake the ground anew? And so in this series, what I do is I pull apart abolition by pulling apart first where it comes out of, which is the process of colonization and what colonization really is. And then from there, what does it mean to actually kind of engage in abolitionist work, which I call planting seeds. And in planting those seeds, it's really about us understanding that it's not about necessarily remaking living in life for us right now. It's really about what can we do in the present to ensure sustainable futures that do not reproduce the same oppressive past, right? And from there, I then talk about then when you actually do the work of abolition, it is disruptive in nature. So what does that really mean to then engage in abolitionist actions, right? So that we don't have these kind of very nostalgic or very delusional expectations of very real world consequences of pushing back against power. Because abolition at its core is really pushing back, is both revealing what's going on and then pushing back against the power structures that keep us in subjugated spaces, okay? And so when we think about abolition, and I say abolition, right, I want you to think about what's the first thing that comes to mind. Now, many times people think of abolition, they think of slavery, they think of the Civil War, if you're in the US, right? And again, abolition was a movement that was actually much more international back in the 1800s as different places were realizing that to literally subjugate and enslave other human beings is kind of messed up, right? So maybe we shouldn't do that shit. So abolition became a praxis, a movement making that brought people together under the umbrella or the goal of literally abolishing an institution that was not good for all, and that institution was slavery. Now, but what is the institution of slavery? The institution itself sits within and its functions for the larger nation state's political economy. So this is where we have to realize that slavery never ended. It just got transmuted because the institution of slavery, right, again, is foundational to the political economy that set up the foundations of the U.S. nation state. So when your foundations literally are built upon an economic system that requires labor to be cheap or free, right? In order for you to reap as many rewards or as much money as you possibly can, as much profit for whatever you are producing, right, or whatever your labor force is producing, when that is literally how you create and built and funded not only your economy and your state, but also the revolution that led to you being able to create your nation state. Because let's not get it twisted, y'all, and I'll talk about this in another video. The American Revolution's funding was funded by the plantation economy, was funded by many of the Southern and Caribbean plantations, because that is where the money was in order to fund the revolution against England. Sorry about that. My video stopped for a second. Okay. So when we understand that that is the foundation, right? And one way that political economy's foundation was enacted was through the institution of slavery. Okay. And slavery was articulated or was performed in this kind of brutal chattel way, right? That we saw embedded in laws and codes. Hence, 3/5 of an enslaved, 3/5 of a person was counted for numbers for the House, for the government, right? There's ways that it's heavily embedded. Slavery was heavily embedded in the actual government and legal systems and laws of this nation. Once that left, y'all, there was still a void because the nation state still needs labor in order to fund itself. And so this is when we start to see the transmutation and we see the rise of corporations and also the rise of prisons, right? So we talk about now, and we call the new abolition many times, people are focused on and are working to abolishing the institution of prisons, right? The prison industrial complex, because the prison became the new plantation that allowed you both to take people from, literally take people, strip them of their citizenship, right? Which then strips them essentially of their humanity, because being a citizen gives you validation and sight by the state, which means it makes you legitimate. So when any parts of your citizenship are stripped from you, right? Hence why we had the 1960s, that whole civil rights movement, and the aftermath of that. Once the parts of that citizenship is stripped from you, parts of your humanity are. So incarcerated folks have not having the right to vote, once they leave the prison, right, or once they leave the jail, means that they have no ability to participate in the system that says that it wants to rehabilitate them. So there's a way that there's more exploitation. So what abolition is doing now, the new abolition, is really asking us to tackle the new what we call the new Jim Crow, right? Which is essentially the prison industrial complex. But as we all know, it doesn't stop there, because again, what is the labor force that sustains the economy, and that we can then essentially either not pay or underpay, so that those who control the means and modes of production can reap as much profit and reward as they can. Well, that comes in being the worker in a capitalist society, right? And so right now, especially if you're in the US and you're feeling the tightness of this economy, of this recession that the state literally told us they were going to put us in, because the economy itself is given more rights than actual citizens are. And we saw this when 2013, during the Obama administration, when they gave corporations essentially rights as humans, or personhood rights, right? In the present day, we're feeling the tightness of the fact that it is the prison, but in general, it is all these institutions that are making sure that we are beholden to them, because without our labor, they can't function, right? So for me, abolition then allows us to break the hold that these institutions have on our minds, that keep us bounded and thinking that they are the only way that we can engage or live or be in society. Once we can break that hold, right, by breaking our minds a bit, it allows the expansion of what is possible, which again expands our sight, which allows us to see different ways that we can actually do this thing called living in life. So abolition to me is foundational to new world making and to kind of decolonial dreaming, because we can't dream of better futures until we're very clear about where we are in the present. But that present is dictated by the past that we are holding on to shape how we understand this present moment. And so for me, abolition becomes a lens that we can use to interrogate the stories we are told about where we come from as a nation, as a people, within the nation, right? So that we can allow truth to enter to the space, and that truth then can set us free. It'll make us uncomfortable, it'll make us have to self-reflect, but it can set us free, because what it does, it allows our minds to expand. So I always say, for me, abolition is about breaking the mind, because it breaks the hold that the institutions have on us and our attachments we have to these institutions that are rooted within reproduction of oppressive systems, right? Once we can break that, that is when possibilities happen, and we need possibilities in order to have new worlds, okay? So I'm going to stop here. It's a long intro. This intro, I think, is probably longer than all three videos combined, but welcome to my channel. This is one of many mini lectures to come. Last caveat is, as you watch these videos, you're going to see on the screen recommended readings. Now, this I would call actually a mini syllabus. So you will see the first video will have a number of readings, and then the subsequent two add on with more readings that both align to what I'm talking about, but also build on what I'm calling the small curriculum to help people, if you want to do your own study individually or collectively, to be able to have at least some initial sources that you yourself can engage with, because it's really about how you read the text and what you draw out of it to help you make sense of your lived reality. And so what I do is provide both a kind of a template of how to do that and then give my analysis of it. But really, I really implore everybody to do your own interrogation, your own reading, your own contemplation with yourself and with others, because this to me is how we allow ourselves to expand our minds and ensure that we have knowledge without borders. All right, so let's get to the videos. When you break something, right, it's broken. And no matter how much you try to put it back together to be in this image of what it once was, the new thing you create will be different from the original, especially if you're the one breaking something that you don't really understand the structure of what the object is that you broke. So all you can do is rely upon what you already know, your own imagination, your own knowledge, your own experience, to figure out how to piece back these broken pieces that you're hoping maybe will look like the original, but again, because it's broken and it's being reconstructed by somebody who didn't understand the original structure of the object being broken, it will be different. Now, over time, if that reconfigured object is what people understand to be the original structure of said object, because time has lapsed and it's been forgotten the original way that the object that was broken was, right? Then that becomes the new origin story. That becomes the new foundation structure that people then build upon. But that foundation is a bit shaky because it's not really the original, it's mimicking the original, and it's got a bunch of fault and crack lines, again, because when you bring it back together, when you piece it back together, not knowing how the original structure was supposed to be, it can eventually have the cracks to fall apart because it's not necessarily sustainable, but it's just been given the facade of sustainability because that is all everyone knows. This is colonization, okay? This is an example of colonization, because what colonization did was have people come in to structure they didn't understand, they broke them, and then reconfigured them in the idea of what they only knew. So the reconfiguration of former structures was through a broken lens, but that over time became the foundation of what we understand these so-called societies to be based upon. So as we're starting to think about how do we remove ourselves from these colonial structures, we have to remember the structures themselves are just reconfigurations of past understandings of past structures, right? That are not sustainable because there's all these fault and crack lines. So when we think about what does it mean to do the decolonial, to do decolonial work, it's not about doing the opposite of colonization. That's not it. Because the colonial completely refigured everything in its image. It is completely intermeshed. So abolition becomes necessary to break that structure so that the foundations that we're going to start from new become a little bit more secure and not just a repurposing, but a complete reimagining. Let me know if this makes sense. Like, share, follow. Following up my last video about colonization as an act of breaking and remaking, and what does it mean then to do the decolonial via abolition work, we have to remember something as well. When you break something, especially if what is broken is living, a living being, whether it be a human being, another form of life, nature itself, any essence that has life in it, when you break it, that hurts. It's violent. And as you have broken a living being, you try to reconfigure it back together in your own image, right? So that it mimics you or is able to be controlled by you because you understand it more in your image. The impact of that violent breaking will last over time. We call this trauma. We can call it generational trauma. We can call it abuse. We can call it the impact of the colonial imagination, whatever it is. But I don't want to diminish the impact that this breaking, that the colonizer and colonization itself did to former indigenous structures and remaking it in its own image, the impact it has in the present day. So when we're trying to do the decolonial work, we're trying to do the abolition work, when we're trying to figure out how do we break out of a system, out of a matrix, out of the hold, whatever you want to call it, whatever makes sense in your brain, right? When you're trying to remove yourself from oppressive systems that have been made in its own image, therefore made you and your ancestral line in its own image and fed it back to you as somehow your actual lineage, right? Or your actual history. We must remember that work is not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pure, nor will it be straightforward. That work took generations to get us where we are today. So to break the hold means we are breaking a lot of deeply embedded traumas, deeply embedded pain, deeply embedded hurts that need to be ripped open. But it took a long time to get here. So it's going to take a minute to go somewhere else. So think of yourself, if you're doing the work now, as planting the seeds for the future. Making the space, revealing the fault lines, because those cracks, even though that it was where the initial pain was, can be the location of relief. Because we can open up and see that we don't have to rely upon that structure anymore. We can actually break it apart and know that in that breaking, whatever we can conjure up won't hold on to the past, but we know that we can create a whole new future that is not relying upon what the colonizer told us is actually who we are. Let me know if this makes sense as well. Like, share, and follow for more. Part 3. When you're planting seeds, abolitionist seeds, what you are doing is planting seeds of disruption, because you are asking, you are demanding that the foundations, that broken foundation that was pieced together via the colonizer's imagination, you are asking that those seeds disrupt by pulling apart that glue so that you can break apart that structure. When you do that, you got to realize something, y'all. Not everybody can come with you, because not everybody wants to come with you. Now, this is where representation can fuck us up, when we think that how someone looks is indicative of their political stance. And therefore, because we look alike, somehow we have the same goal. That assumption is what has gotten many in the past in movements fucked up. Because you got to remember, colonization put something in that glue. It wasn't just a mixed match of things in order to bring something together. When it broke apart indigenous structures, therefore indigenous knowledges, therefore indigenous understandings of land and life, and remade it in its own image and then fed it back to us, right? Over time, what was in that glue was Christianity. So the glue that's holding these broken foundations together is embedded with a moralistic understanding that attaches itself to movements. Don't let the naivete set in, and I'm saying this because I have been there. I have been there more than once. But realize that when we feel as if we have to bring everybody along, and if we don't, we're not a good person, therefore we're reproducing the same old structure, I want to challenge that and say, thinking that way is actually allowing that glue to still hold on fragmentally to that breakage, right? Because it was Christianity that gave the colonizer the justification in its own mind to be able to dominate all land and life. Therefore, reordering life in a hierarchy that is indicative and completely in line with the Christian understanding of hierarchy, from an all-benevolent God who is jealous in nature all the way down to its devil. So when you are breaking apart the seeds, when you are planting the seeds of abolition, you are doing the work of disruption, and you are breaking apart that glue and hold. So many people cannot or do not or will not want to come with you. And who else is not going to come with you? Your former self, who was also beholden to that structure. All right? This concludes my micro series on what I would call Abolition 101. If you liked it, please like, share, and follow. And if you want to learn more with me, check out my Patreon, in which I have a book club. And in the next month, I will be offering actually more lecture-based videos for those interested in learning more. All right, till next time.